My name is Evelyn. I'm 28 years old, and for the last 3 of those years, I've been married to a man who has perfected the art of being in a room without actually being present. Tonight was a prime example. I was recounting a particularly soul-crushing day. At the marketing agency, a client had torn apart 3 weeks of my team's work with a single flippant email. I was standing in the archway between the living room and the kitchen, my voice rising and falling with frustration, my hands gesturing wildly. Owen, my husband, was on the couch. His attention was captured by a documentary about the fall of some ancient empire, his face illuminated by the flickering blue light of the screen. He murmured, his eyes never leaving the legionnaires marching across the television. He said the color palette was aggressively beige. I pressed on, desperate for a spark of outrage on my behalf. Aggressively beige, Owen. What does that even mean? That's tough, Eve, he said, the words automated hollow. I gave up. The story deflated out of me, and I turned back to the sterile silence of the kitchen. This was our routine. I would come home brimming with the chaos of my life, and he would absorb none of it, his emotional walls as impenetrable as the historical fortresses he loved to study for his university lectures. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was the household manager, the co-signer on the mortgage, a familiar ghost who made sure the bills were paid and the refrigerator was stocked. The first time I noticed Leo really noticed him was during a brutal summer heatwave in Chicago. The office air conditioning was on the fritz, and everyone's temper was frayed. He wasn't even on my team, just a freelance photographer the agency hired for high-profile campaigns. He found me in the break room, staring blankly at the coffee machine. He didn't just ask, "How are you?" He leaned against the counter, his posture relaxed, and said, "You look like you're about one bad email away from committing arson." I laughed, a real startled laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who pays attention," he said, his smile knowing and gentle. He had these warm hazel eyes that actually held my gaze, making me feel seen. We talked for 20 minutes. I told him about the beige-loving client, and he didn't just grunt. He nodded, he winced in sympathy, and he said things Owen hadn't said in years. "That's infuriating. Your work has a soul. That guy sounds like a spreadsheet." He had a way about him, an easy charisma that felt like sinking into a warm bath. He was passionate, talking about light and shadow with the same intensity I used to have for my own work. A few days later, he mentioned a vintage vinyl shop in Wicker Park. "They have an incredible jazz section," he'd said, his eyes lighting up. "You have to hear Coltrane on a proper pressing. It changes you." When I admitted I'd never really explored jazz, he didn't mock me like Owen might have with his quiet academic snobbery. Instead, Leo looked intrigued. "Then we have to fix that. How about during lunch next week?" And honestly, why wouldn't I? It was just lunch. Just 2 colleagues sharing a mutual interest. That's what I told myself anyway. Walking into that record store with Leo felt like stepping into another dimension. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and dust, a perfume of forgotten stories. He moved through the aisles with a practiced ease, his fingers dancing over the spines of albums. His excitement was infectious. "Oh, you have to hear this," he'd whisper, pulling a record from its sleeve. He'd place it on the listening station turntable, lower the needle, and then after listening for only a second himself, he'd gently take the headphones and place them over my ears. For a moment, the world would dissolve into the smoky wail of a saxophone. He would watch my face, waiting for my reaction, and when I smiled, his own face would break into a grin so wide and genuine, it made my chest ache. When was the last time Owen had been excited to share anything with me besides a dry historical fact? I brought a record home that day, a Nina Simone album Leo had insisted was essential. When I put it on, the rich, sorrowful voice filled our apartment. Owen walked in from his study, a book in hand, and frowned. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked, his tone laced with a faint disdain. "It's Nina Simone. A colleague recommended her." He shrugged his eyes, already back on his book. "It sounds pretentious." The word hung in the air, a small, sharp dart puncturing my joy. It was so typical. Instead of curiosity, his first instinct was dismissal. Meanwhile, Leo and I started texting. At first it was innocent. Links to songs, articles about photography, but slowly the conversations bled from the workday into the evenings, then stretched into the weekends. We talked about our childhoods, our frustrations, our quiet little dreams that felt too silly to say out loud to anyone else. The conversations flowed so easily. I found myself checking my phone constantly, a giddy anticipation fluttering in my stomach whenever his name lit up the screen. One Tuesday, I was having a truly awful day. Everything that could go wrong did. I was texting him from my desk, a stream of frustrated complaints. He stopped responding with words. Instead, a message came through: send me a selfie. I need to see a friendly face. I hesitated for only a second. I angled my phone, tried to fix my hair, and snapped a picture, a half-hearted, weary smile on my face. His reply came back almost instantly. Tired looks good on you. But the picture I can't get out of my head is you in those black trousers you wore yesterday. A beat. My heart started to thrum. Then the follow-up text. Your ass looked... Well, let's just say it made my entire day. The air left my lungs. The message was a bright, dangerous spark in the gray landscape of my life. It was a line, a massive, uncrossable line, and he had just pole vaulted over it. And God, I loved it. I felt a blush creep up my neck, a thrilling, shameful heat. This was the attention I had been starving for. Raw, appreciative, and a little bit forbidden. Instead of shutting it down, instead of saying it was inappropriate, I found myself typing back. You think so? Then I stood up, walked to the full-length mirror by the office coat rack, and took another photo from a slightly different angle. I sent it without a second thought. That night I went to bed feeling beautiful for the first time in years. I fell asleep with a smile on my face, a dangerous secret humming under my skin. My phone was on the nightstand charging. It was the last thing I saw before I closed my eyes, the screen dark and silent. For now, I was jolted awake by a profound stillness in the room. Not a sound, but the absence of it. The air was heavy charged. I opened my eyes, my vision blurry in the pre-dawn gloom. A figure was standing by my side of the bed. It was Owen. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, a dark silhouette against the faint gray light filtering through the window. In his hand was my phone, its screen casting an unholy blue glow on his face. His expression was one I had never seen before. It was perfectly, terrifyingly blank. My blood ran cold. My stomach plummeted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet words he spoke next sliced through the silence with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Evelyn. His voice was shaking, not with rage, but with a tightly controlled tremor, like a wire stretched to its breaking point. Who is Leo? And why is he texting you at midnight about your ass? The words repeated back to me, in my husband's trembling voice, sounded cheap. Tawdry. Stripped of the exciting, flirtatious context, they were just ugly. My mind raced, scrambling for a foothold. The usual excuses, the ones I had been whispering to myself for weeks, tumbled out of my mouth. It's not what you think, Owen. It's just a stupid joke. He's just a colleague from work, we mess around sometimes. You have no right to go through my phone. Each denial felt weaker than the last. He didn't react. He just continued to stare at me, his eyes boring into mine, stripping away all my carefully constructed justifications. He wasn't just seeing the text. He was seeing all the small lies, all the secret smiles, all the moments of connection I had stolen from our marriage and given to someone else. I expected a fight. I braced myself for shouting for accusations, for the dramatic, messy explosion our marriage had been building toward. But it never came. After a long, suffocating silence, he lowered the phone. He looked at me for one more moment, his face unreadable. Then he said one thing. I see. He turned and walked out of the bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, listening. I heard the faint click of his study door shutting down the hall. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, the coffee wasn't made. When I walked into the kitchen, he was already dressed for work, pouring cereal into a bowl. He didn't look at me. He didn't say good morning. He moved around me as if I were a piece of furniture, a ghost in our own home. His presence was an immense, crushing weight, but it was utterly, devastatingly silent. All day my hands shook. I tried calling him, texting him. No reply. When I got home that evening, his car was in the driveway, but the house was quiet. I found him in his study, sitting at his desk, staring at his computer screen. I stood in the doorway, my throat tight. He didn't acknowledge me. The only sound in the entire house was the steady, methodical click, click, click of his mouse. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. The silence was not empty. It was full. It was full of accusation, of disappointment, of a cold, hard finality that I couldn't seem to break through. Owen existed in a parallel universe within our own home. He slept on the couch. He made his own meals and ate them in his study. When we passed in the hallway, his eyes looked straight through me. I tried everything. I tried apologizing my words, sounding frantic and hollow in the oppressive quiet. Owen, I am so sorry. It was a mistake. It meant nothing. He walked away without a word. I tried getting angry, hoping to provoke any reaction at all. Are you just going to ignore me forever? Say something, damn it. He calmly put on his headphones. At work I was a wreck. I saw Leo in the hallway and felt a wave of nausea. His charming smile now looked predatory. The validation he offered felt like poison. I avoided him, making excuses and hiding in my office. He was the cause of all this. I told myself a convenient scapegoat for a fire I had willingly helped start. On Friday afternoon, I came home to an empty house. It felt both like a relief and a terrifying omen. I dropped my keys on the counter and saw his laptop was open. My heart seized. I never looked at his things, but a morbid, desperate curiosity pulled me forward. The screen was open to his email inbox, and there it was. An email he had forwarded to himself, so it sat at the very top. The sender was a name I didn't recognize, followed by LLP, the signature of a law firm. The subject line was a punch to the gut. WD appointment confirmation, Carter O. My breath hitched. I clicked on it. The body of the email was brief, professional, and catastrophic. It confirmed a 1-hour consultation for the following Tuesday with a senior partner specializing in family law. Divorce. The word wasn't even in the email, but it screamed from the screen. I was still standing there, staring at the words, when I heard the front door open. Owen walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. He saw me at his laptop, saw the expression on my face, and his own face remained impassive. There was no surprise, no guilt, just a weary resignation. I held up my phone where I'd taken a picture of the screen. My hand was shaking so badly the image was blurry. "What is this, Owen?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "What the hell is this?" For the first time in nearly a week, he looked directly at me. His eyes were tired but clear. "It's a consultation, Evelyn," he said, his voice flat and even. "I need to understand my options." Options? For what? You're going to throw away our marriage over a few stupid text messages. He set the grocery bag down on the counter with deliberate care. "This isn't about a few text messages," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "This is about realizing I don't know the person I live with. It's about months of lies. It's about the fact that you built a secret, intimate world with another man while I was in the next room." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "I will not spend the rest of my life married to a stranger." Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. This wasn't a dramatic gesture. This was a plan. Owen, the meticulous history professor, was approaching the end of our marriage like a research project. Methodically, logically, and with all emotion ruthlessly excised. I called my best friend Rose, expecting a sympathetic ear, a chorus of "he's overreacting." Instead, I got a hesitant silence. "Eve," she said finally, her voice careful. "What did you expect? You lied to him for months. You were sending pictures to another guy. Maybe you should try seeing this from his side for a minute." Even my own friend, the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. I doubled my efforts to fix what I had broken. I filled the house with the smell of his favorite meal, a beef stew that took hours to cook. He came home, saw the table set for two, and simply said, "I'm not hungry," before retreating into his study. I bought tickets to a concert for a band he loved. The tickets sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days before they vanished, thrown away without comment. My attempts at seduction were even more humiliating. I wore the lingerie he'd bought me for our anniversary last year. He glanced at me, a flicker of something pity maybe in his eyes, and then turned away. "Don't, Evelyn," he said softly. "Just don't." The real blows came without warning. One morning, a man with a clipboard was at our door. An appraiser. He walked through our home, my home, taking notes and measurements, his presence, a clinical confirmation that our life together was now being itemized for liquidation. A week later, a letter from the bank arrived. Owen had opened his own separate checking account. He was systematically dismantling our shared life piece by piece right in front of my eyes. And he was doing it all in near total silence. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I cornered him in the kitchen as he was getting a glass of water. The desperation made my voice shrill. "Just tell me what you want me to do," I cried, tears streaming down my face. "I'll do anything. Tell me how to fix this." He turned from the sink, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He considered me for a long moment, as if I were a complex historical puzzle. "You want to know?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "All right." He took a step closer, and I held my breath. "You want to fix this. Show me every single message between you and him. All of it. Then you will give me your phone and all your passwords. You will cut off all contact with Leo immediately. And tomorrow morning you will write your letter of resignation." I stared at him, stunned into silence. Quit my job, my career, it was an insane, controlling demand. He saw the hesitation in my eyes. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "But you won't do that, will you?" he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "Because you're not really sorry you did it, Evelyn." He leaned in a little closer, and his final words were the ones that shattered me completely. "You're just sorry you got caught." The end came as our life together had not with a bang, but with the quiet finality of a closing door. The house was a landscape of cardboard boxes. Our shared history was now divided into neat labeled squares: kitchen, books, linens. His boxes were stacked neatly by the door. Mine were scattered, half-packed and chaotic. He agreed to talk one last time. We sat at the dining room table, the same table where we'd hosted dinner parties and celebrated birthdays, now a barren island in a sea of brown cardboard. He spoke first, his voice weary, the cold anger replaced by a profound, fathomless sadness. "The hardest part wasn't the text message, Eve," he began, his eyes fixed on the wood grain of the table. "I could have maybe eventually gotten over the stupidity of that. The worst part was the weeks before. Lying in bed next to you, listening to you talk about your day, and having no idea that you were living a completely different life on that little screen in your hand." He finally looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the full depth of the wound I had inflicted. The worst part was realizing the woman I married was gone. She'd been gone for months, and in her place was a stranger. A person who could look me in the eye day after day and lie without flinching. He shook his head slowly. "You can't rebuild a marriage with a stranger. There's nothing left to build on." And in that moment, the entire flimsy structure of my self-deception collapsed. He wasn't being dramatic. He wasn't being controlling or unreasonable. He was just done. He was accepting the reality that I had created. He wasn't punishing me. He was simply removing himself from a situation that was causing him unbearable pain. I had made myself untrustworthy, and he had finally decided to believe me. I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend myself, to shout that he had pushed me away, that his neglect had left a void that someone was bound to fill. But the words died in my throat. They were just more excuses, more echoes in a hollow room. He was right. I wasn't sorry for what I'd done. I was terrified of the consequences. He stood up from the table. "The papers will be sent to your new address," he said, his voice formal. "Now the last vestiges of intimacy gone. I wish you the best, Evelyn. I truly do." He walked to the front door, picked up the last of his boxes, and left. The click of the latch echoed through the empty apartment. Silence. A different kind of silence now. Not the weaponized silence of his punishment, but a vast, empty silence that was entirely my own. It was the sound of my future. My phone lying on the table beside me buzzed. The screen lit up with a familiar name. A new message from Leo. "Thinking of you." I stared at the 4 words. 4 words that had once sent a thrill through my entire body. The validation, the excitement, the feeling of being desired, it had all felt so vital, so necessary. Now it was just pathetic. A cheap trinket I had been given in exchange for everything that had ever mattered. I wanted to be seen. And now, sitting alone in the wreckage of my life, surrounded by the ghosts of a future I had thrown away, I had never felt more invisible.